Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here. We're going to give you an update on where we are with our work. I'm here with a couple of colleagues, Nicola, Eleni, Letizia, and my name is Bruno. And Letizia will start us off just to provide a little bit of context for the work that we've done.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Let me figure out first. Seems easy. So first of all, before buildings, we're very much interested in the intangible city as well. So the memories and the identity of the city before the buildings. We're having this conversation in the office. What is the intangible city? And cities are made of collective memory. That is the sum of individual memories over time. So it's not this one idea, but it's a collection of ideas. Memory is not static, and it can get lost, it's selected, it can evolve, it's layered, it can change. So it is quite a complex subject. Nonetheless, it is quite important, especially, exactly why and how reinstating urban memory when the physical city is temporarily lost. So it is important, and because of the sense of belonging, of inclusion, of ownership for the community, for social sustainability, identity, cultural sustainability, and stability. And it's important to really attract people back to Antakya and to make it recognizable. So how can we then understand urban memory if the city is temporarily lost, inhabitants are gone? It is about paying attention to oral history, looking at archives, material culture, interviews, making maps, audio-visual material. So this is very much a declaration of our aspiration, I guess. But we also started looking at the work produced by our colleagues at Sauer, so which really shows us how the urban memories of Antakya are really much still there. So we started listening to them as collected by our colleagues. We extracted some snippets here that really resonated with a greater group of colleagues at Foster & Partners. It really gives this good sense of what the city was like and how residents felt and feel like it as a family, as a city of many flavors that must stay. For instance, here the old streets are indispensable. The smell, the feeling, even the smell and the sensorial aspects of the city are very important. A word that describes Antakya is heritage, and this comes from, as you see, even a sort of younger resident, but then even much more so, there is a sense of connection, and if there's this connection, there is hope. So this is just to say that this is really what we're hoping for, like to continue listening to the memories of residents and sort of understand better what the memories and identity of the city was and is. Ultimately, this comes together for design purposes. So urban memories become the image of the city through design. And we're calling, an emeritus colleague, Kevin Lynch, a planner, probably most of you know him, and some of his quotations, every citizen has had long associations with some part of the city, and its image is soaked in memories and meanings. And we do want to recognize that. And we need an environment which is not only simply well-organized, but poetic and symbolic as well. Such a sense of place in itself enhances every human activity that occurs there and encourages the deposit of memory trace. So yeah, we thought this was very good to summarize like sort of our approach going forward and hoping to make this process as meaningful as possible together with our local colleagues and other stakeholders.
Thank you. This is a project like no other. The complexity of the work that needs to be done, the pace and the speed at which the project needs to be developed, the context within the project set are just a couple of examples that make this a really extraordinary piece of work also for us. And I'm going to share with you just some ideas of how we think the master plan could evolve and develop over the coming weeks and months. For us, in the context of what the teachers just shared and the memories that people have of the place, it's really the need to understand the old pre-earthquake urban structure and think how out of that a new city can evolve that people still recognize and can connect to when they move back into the city. Our aim for the master plan is to recall the old town before the earthquakes in terms of its scale, relationship, and configurations, but to reinforce local character and climate. So as a hypothesis, I think it would be great to try and bring back what there was before, but then improve and get it ready for the next century, to respond to climate change, to be ready for the new generations that will move and live in Antakya. Starting off with sort of a zoom into a piece of the priority zone, we recognize the very fine-grained structure that existed within the city centre. And that was really the starting point for us to try and understand how these spaces work, how the streets do connect. So the dots represent all the intersections between the streets as they existed. And then on the right, you can see a zoom in into that area. And again, we show in the bright red the bigger streets, and then in the darker red the smaller local connections. And if I'm just going to flick now between a proposed and an old plan, you can see how we're trying to retain those lines from the existing city and retain them in a new proposal. And I think for us, this is one way of preserving that memory that people have. So when they move back, it is a space that people recognize. With that, we're looking to preserve the character of the spaces and the streets, as I just explained. On top of that structure, we can then start to build additional linkages and start to make these changes and improvements, create better vistas, view corridors, and connect to the open spaces. Because I think it would be great if that finder network connected you to the amenities, it connects you to the open spaces. And again, these are pedestrian priority spaces that really allow people to move through an environment that they can relate to. We started to create these elevations of part of the city, and for us it was really a useful exercise. We've unfortunately never had the chance to visit the city as it was, but you can start to feel the grain of the architecture. You can start to see the textures and the colors, etc. And again, I think these are all elements that we really need to think about how we can bring them back, because this is what people remember. This is this collective urban memory. So as we then think about the massing, and we're looking forward to seeing all your presentations this afternoon, one of the things we've been discussing is how do we reference what was there, and how do we make sure that again there's a clear link between what there was and what we're proposing, so people feel at home in the new development. We've got the space, we've got the buildings, we've got the space between the buildings, and that's equally important. And one of the things we started to do is sort of just to play with sort of a 3D model and look at spaces as they existed on the left and spaces as they could be on the right. And you see that they're the same, right? So it's not a very exciting slide, but that's the point, right? It's a space that we're standing in the same place of the city before and after, and we're not trying to change it all. We're trying to create references and links between old and the new. We're trying to create these connections that people, we believe, will recognize and appreciate. But it's also about the architecture. It's about the textures, the colors. You can see different sort of architectural elements. We got the corner balconies that stood out for us the sawtooth facades, and the expression of vertical elements. And again, these were done in the last century. We're in the 21st century. I'm sure you come up with lots of great and different and new ideas, and I think that's important. But all of those ideas somehow should reference that there was a city that existed before, and we need to create these connections between the old and the new. And I already talked about the colors, the textures, the materiality. That would be really great to explore and create something that is uniquely Antakya and that people will recognize. As we reshape the massing, there's also opportunities to change and evolve and to improve the massing for microclimate, for instance. So we can provide shading or sun where and when we need it. So we can start to make subtle and informed changes as we evolve the development. Another thing that was really important to us and stood out is the programming of the ground floor. And again, we heard in some of the interviews by our colleagues at Sauer, where people talked about the amenities, everything that makes the daily life so rich and special. So again, as the architecture gets developed, let's make sure that we provide these opportunities for businesses. People will need places to shop, places to eat and drink, but also places to work. And I think that the ground floor is an important and a critical element to that. And then the design of the public realm, the streets, the spaces between the buildings need to allow those functions to happen. But it's not just about the commercial buildings. We also heard about the residential buildings to make sure that there's an active interface between the buildings and the public realm. So these tight communities can again thrive. That we've learned about of people seeing their neighbours, talk to them, and that's difficult if people live in tall buildings and can't have any visual links with each other. As we then zoom out and look at the overall priority areas. There's opportunities to just sort of take a strategic view, both in terms of the movement network. So we recognize the four yellow bigger streets that MIC just described, but also just think about the massing on a sort of strategic level, making sure that when you put all the different puzzle pieces together, that they are connected and form a cohesive city like there was before. The space between the buildings, again, should be shaped in response to the microclimate, making sure we have sun where we need it and shade where we're trying to keep the spaces cool, but also make sure that the spaces are of the right size and are programmed in the right way. So we have playgrounds and community spaces and parks for people to use and enjoy the outdoors. And we want to try and learn from what was there and bring back those elements, again, that the people of Antakya will know and recognize, and it's whether it's the planting around the civic buildings or the elements like the steps. Let's try and put them back into the same place. Let's make them accessible for everybody, make sure you can get a pram up and down or a wheelchair, but let's try and maintain and build on what existed in the old days. And then lastly, again, the massing should respond to that landscape. We can stagger the views, for instance, stagger the buildings, for instance, to maximize the views towards the river, as just one example of how the built environment, the public realm can work together more closely. On the overall scale of the priority zone, it's about these main nodes, these main routes that were just described by MIC, which is sort of an evolving strategy on mobility of how we connect this then to the wider city. I've talked about the green routes on this drawing, which are these connections, these strategic connections between the buildings and the blocks. Again, trying to connect the open spaces and the amenities. And then we've had the blue network, which is this very fine-grained spaces that existed previously, which for us are one of the sort of defining elements of Antakya, and it would be great to see some of those again in the new plans. And lastly, as we zoom into the very center, we do believe that there is an opportunity to rethink how that space is used. It's at the heart of this development, and it would be great if we could try and make this a space which is for people, which celebrates the people who lived through this terrible disaster, and not fill it back up with cars. If we can. So again, I mean, we got to be in great hands with MIC. They're very experienced planners, and I'm sure they will make sure everybody can get where they can get, but ultimately we also have some spaces that celebrate everybody who lives and visits the city. So, in summary, we try and maintain as much of the existing routes and the local routes as possible. We try to extend this network to create meaningful connections. The new massing should emulate the rhythm and scale of the buildings as they existed. We want to modulate the buildings in response to their context, so optimize for microclimate, the views, the connections to the landscape. We want to reference architectural features, colors, and textures in the proposed designs. Provide active frontages along the main routes. There's not going to be shops in every single building, but we want to think about where are these main nodes of accessibility, where is the people flowing going to be, and we put the functions back into those places where the shops will thrive and flourish. We want to improve and expand the green open space and consider the programming along it. So again, it's not just about planting trees, it's about thinking about playgrounds, football fields, whatever people want to do, provide these spaces for activities that let community come together and allow communities to heal. And we want to create a new urban focal point that puts people first and not cars. So that space that I showed you at the end, I think would really benefit if we could go back to what it was in the older days, where it was a space where people could come together and celebrate. This is the city as it existed. And again, I'm going to show you a couple of images of what a sort of a massing could look like that we started to look at, again, in the response also to what Happold showed earlier in terms of resilience design for the building blocks. And just one more view looking towards the other direction. But we also acknowledge that this ultimately is a cooperative process, and again, we're delighted to be here today and look forward to seeing your presentations this afternoon. Thank you so much.